Fighting climate change is all about creating new sources of CO2-free energy sources. And at scale, to my knowledge, there are only three valid candidates. It starts with nuclear fusion, deep geothermy, and the third one is actually photovoltaic in space.
If we think about photovoltaic in space, are we talking about like floating photovoltaic panels?
You're talking about huge photovoltaic cells floating in space, being maybe small actuators to make sure that directions are kept like they're needed.
Hello and welcome to VCO2, the podcast that helps you become a smarter impact investor and a better climate tech entrepreneur. Today, we are joined by Dr. Hendrik Brandis, co-founder and partner at Earlybird Venture Capital. Hendrik has a background in aerospace engineering and is a board member at many aerospace companies. And in today's episode, we'll talk about how advancement in space technology are accelerating solutions for climate change. Before we start, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're on YouTube, or give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. This episode is sponsored by Buresol, an AI-driven energy company transforming how businesses store, manage, and consume energy. Buresol's energy as a service model makes clean energy adoption seamless, helping industrial and SME achieve energy autonomy, cost optimization, and sustainability without any upfront investment. They are now expanding in France and Europe, and they are launching their first commercial projects. So if you want to learn more, you can find the link to their website in the description of this episode, or you can reach out to their CEO, Felipe Ariola. Back to this episode. Hendrik, or should I call you Dr. Hendrik?
No, please, sure, call me Hendrik. So first of all, hello, Hugo, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on the show. It's a pleasure. And I guess to kick things off, could you help me understand how space technologies are supporting the fight against climate change? Because that's not obvious for me.
It starts with high-resolution imagery and observation. Think about what it means with respect to climate change and CO2 emission. If a forest fire is detected so timely that it can be quickly distinguished, the CO2 amounts emitted by a forest fire is enormous. Think about same dimension policing deforestation, which you can only do out of space. It's a huge impact. Then you have secondary impacts if we talk about atmospheric sensors, ocean monitoring, weather and climate modeling, etc., which just drives up our skills and our ability to actually fight climate change. This is something we're doing as we speak. If you go further into the future, the potential is even way beyond. I think fighting climate change is all about creating new sources of CO2-free energy sources. And at scale, to my knowledge, there are only three valid candidates to actually provide that for mankind. And it starts with nuclear fusion. It continues.
How is that related to space, the nuclear
Not
fusion?
really. No relation, I would say. Maybe there is some relation, but it's not related to space, but it is definitely a scalable CO2 energy source and therefore extremely relevant for fighting climate change. Second thing, also not related to space, by the way, is deep geothermy, a huge potential. And the third one is actually photovoltaic in space. So if you think about large photovoltaic-based energy factories, plants in space that can provide enormous amounts of energy, independent from day and night, from cloudy or not cloudy weather, efficiency and yields can go up as much as 7x to what you find on Earth. And if you then transmit that energy back to Earth, obviously that is an enormous benefit, and the potential is huge. You, by the way, have secondary effect, because once these power plants become large, they also shield the sun shining on Earth. So we're creating some sort of artificial clouds. Concepts are there to shield the sun shining on Earth with huge artificial sun sails, if you want, artificial clouds, which can also help quite significantly to reduce global warming. So you have secondary effect, yeah, the shielding effect and the CO2-free energy generation. Yes, this is a little bit out, and we need much more space infrastructure, such as Starship and large rockets, etc., to bring stuff up. But it is a tangible option. It is probably not much far out than nuclear fusion and deep geothermy at scale. And it's the third opportunity we have. And I think we got to pursue all the three of them in order to be sufficiently safe that at some stage we will be able to provide the Earth or the world and mankind at 100% CO2 free energy.
And just to react on a couple of things you said. So, on the first one, if we think about photovoltaic in space, are we talking about like floating photovoltaic panels on the atmosphere? So that's what we're talking about. So,
That's what
really,
we're talking. You're talking about huge photovoltaic cells, if you want, in floating in space, being have maybe small actuators to make sure that directions are kept like they're needed. But this is exactly what we're talking about, and then connected to a power station, which has then the task to transmit the energy back to Earth.
and that's the question I have for you, which is how do you transmit it back to Earth? Because obviously, I don't think we'll be, having a cable from her.
You're not going to have a cable, I can tell you. So it is possible. It is physically possible. You can obviously transmit energy through the air. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying that all the technology is yet there and available. But the same thing holds true to nuclear fusion, yeah? And we all have the vision how it is going to work. Some people say it's far out, others say it's probably closer. I would say, that vision is as much or as far out as it is for nuclear fusion, where we invest billions, tens of billions, rightfully we do. And the same thing holds true for deep geothermy. So we have to pursue the very few options we have to provide a mankind with the needed energy in order to save our planet. That's the only option we have. It's all energy related.
Yeah, no, energy is definitely the backbone of the economy that we have
I mean,
today.
if we have infinite energy, CO2 free energy, we can obviously suck out all the CO2 we have yet emitted. Yeah, direct air capture technologies are advancing every day. We can suck it out. We can store it. We can, really rewind at least part of what we have done in the past. So the what really sets the pace for fighting climate change is the advancement, the progress we make in the provisioning of CO2 free energy. That is what matters. It is good that if we're on our way, save CO2 where we can, but as we probably all sadly know, that global CO2 emissions are going up. They're not going down yet. They're going still up. And the reason being is that population, especially in third world countries, are growing, and energy consumption per person, especially in third world countries, are growing. And we cannot change this. I think they have as much right to consume energy as we have, and they're still way below us. So the only way only way forward is to provide that CO2 free energy at scale for mankind. And space technology can help here. It can directly help by developing one of the three options, and can even indirectly help for the other two, because we are able to create certain materials in space which we never be able to create on Earth. Yeah, yeah, that's the indirect impact.
Yeah, so there are a lot of different contributors when we think about space and climate. I'm just summarizing what you said, but we basically have energy production, and we have also like data collection and data analysis and better data overall to just manage what we do on Earth with forest and with various incidents, which is very interesting. One thing I just want to react to on this idea of a cloud that protects the planet. Do you think that's a good thing? Do you think that's, we talk a lot about space pollution these days as well. Like, do you think the idea of having a cloud that protects the planet is a good idea?
Honestly, I don't know. I'm just saying that at the current stage we are, and where we have put the planet so much at risk, I think we cannot afford to not think about any valid option. I also talked about it not as a premier measure, but rather as a side effect of a photovoltaic power plant in space, because that would create quite an amount of shadow, which is as a side effect of the energy generation. I do know that there are space startups pursuing the shielding in space. The sun shielding is a premier effect without creating energy. So there are serious concepts out there saying, let's create huge foils, they call it sails, floating in space in order to protect or shielding, the sunshine before hitting the Earth. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I have a hard time to judge this, and I understand, the consideration of polluting the orbit. We might need to reserve certain orbits just for these sails. It's not unthinkable, I must say. Yeah, and yes, we will be having more traffic, but also this topic of polluting the orbit, I'd like to put into relation. Um, uh, People are thinking about, if they hear now we're launching last year 2,500 satellites, they're thinking there's huge traffic. I mean, just to put that into proportion, we have how many billions cars on the surface of the Earth? It's isn't it 1.5 billion, something like this? Yeah, it is. It is to be measured in billion. It's at least a billion, and they are all on a relatively smaller surface because they are on Earth, and they are all on the same level, so they have a high likelihood to meet each other. Um, Now we're currently talking about active, no, we're not active. We're talking about a number of 11,500 satellites in orbit, out of which 9,000 are still active. About 11,500 objects in one piece. We have a multiple number of um, parts of former one-piece objects because they crashed or so it's a problem. But still, we're talking about a three-dimensional space. So they're not all on the same level. They're starting to be on, I don't know, 500 kilometers inside up to 36,000 to geostationary orbits. And the likelihood that there's a crash is, even in an unmanaged situation as we have it right now, is extremely low. I think the last crash was 2021, if I'm not mistaken, and the one before was 2009 or so. So it is not so, even in an unmeasured, that they meet every other day. It's still an issue, and we should think about it, especially as we start to exponentially accelerate the number of satellites being launched. Yeah, as I said, We're coming from an era where we had over 30 years between 50 and 150 satellites being launched every year. Last year, I think 2,500, and prediction for 2030 go up to 10,000. So it starts to become a topic, and we have to regulate it, but it is not as critical as one would think.
I guess to go a little bit sideways, you seems to be very passionate about the topic, and you also seems to be very concerned about what's happening on Earth. Why is that? Like, where does that concerns come from, and why are you trying to do something about it? Because a lot of people choose not to, and choose just to live their life. I know it's a bit off topic, but I was curious to learn more.
Maybe it's also the older I get. I mean, I think I find it way more rewarding to invest my time and passion into something which changes the world to the better. One thing is to create value for investors, and obviously that is my premier duty and obligation, given the fact that I'm a manager of other people's money. And I have given promises, and I have to live up to these promises. But if I find an opportunity to live up to these promises, in the same point of time, in parallel, have positive impact on this world, help and support to change this world to the better, for me, this is the optimum. This is the holy grail of spending my time with. And since I do see the opportunity to combine both, even in a manner that many people say sustainable investments or investments in sustainability have even a better outlook for return. I think this is the best of all worlds, and that is what I love to do. And I must admit, the more I age, the more the impact dimension matters more for me personally.
Yeah, and I love to hear that from someone that was not particularly into climate before. I think it's a testament of how much potential there is to make money into climate, or at least to make returns for investors, which I think I love to everyone to understand that, because I feel like a lot of people still think that climate is philanthropy and you don't have to just give grants, which I don't think is true today. But
If one perceives climate action as a philanthropic topic based on grants, I think one is actually on the wrong path, because that by definition limits the impact. You cannot scale philanthropy and grants infinitely. It will always be limited by the available funding. And you can do good. And I love the individual projects, but they will be limited. And if you count the impact on climate change, you cannot see it, unfortunately, despite all the positive motivation and idealism and whatever. If you then compare that with a commercial impact in nuclear fusion startups such as Marble Fusion, I cannot tell you whether that is going to work. Obviously, I do believe, otherwise I wouldn't have invested in. But if that is going to work, and we're going to know that in 3 years, it's changing the world. It's changing everything. It will be providing us with the opportunity to produce infinite energy in a risk-free manner at very affordable cost all over the place. And this is one of the few options we have to really fight climate change. And this is a total commercial investment. This has nothing to do with philanthropy. But the potential impact is, a million times higher than any individual philanthropic project. And I do not want to downplay that. I love the motivation and the positive incentive of people who would like to do good. But the mission I like to get across is, if you really want to have impact, not on a small scale, on a global scale, you have to think about scalability. And scalability will only be possible if it is also economically sensible.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think the sentence I have in mind is like, a company that dies within a year is a company that have no impact. A company that can scale for 10 years, even if the unit economic of impact is slightly lower, at a bigger scale, it just has a massive impact, which I think is the way to go. Going back to space tech, because that's the topic of today's episode, although I feel like we could talk about anything else. What makes it attractive to you as an investor? So, like, I'll ask you to go back to your VC hat and tell me, when you look at this type of companies, what makes it attracting for you?
I'd like to structure my answer in two pieces. One piece is just my personal motivation. I'm an aerospace engineer by training. I started my professional career working for Airbus. And when I became a venture capitalist, I think it was all about business model innovation, software, very distant to where my passion has been with respect to my education and what I love to see it to do. Now I have the enormous privilege to combine my profession, venture capital investments, with my technologically passion, which is aerospace. Because all of a sudden, space tech, not only space tech, but also aerospace. Yeah, I mean, we just lost an important eVTOL company, unfortunately, but nevertheless, the economical concept did make sense. And we find that all over the place. And that brings me back to the second piece of my answer to your question. If I look at space, I mean, that the opportunities are so breathtaking and they're so obvious that as a sensible investor, I can only go for it. It does make so much sense. I mean, simple example. I mean, everything you're going to do in space needs to have to be brought up there, obviously. Yeah, so you have to have launches. The logistics into space is a problem, and it's especially a problem in Europe since we do not have yet the launching capacity. Simple math. I said before, we're coming from 50 to 150 satellites being launched every year. Last year, 2,500 prediction, 2030, 10,000. At the very best, you can, on average, distribute 20 satellites per launch. On average, probably you're not going to reach it because there's also payload limits. Maybe you can reach 10 satellites per launch on average. If you want to distribute 10,000 satellites in orbit, you need 1,000 launches annually. So that means every single day of the year, 3 launches. Yeah. Right now, we're in a situation where we have, I would say, globally, every 3 days a launch. So we need 3 launches a day. So we need 10x of what we have currently. This is such an unbelievable opportunity, economical opportunity. And the entry barriers are so high because launching technology is still an engineering which is done on the physical edge. And it's not easy. It's really not easy. And and if you have such a vehicle and you have such an overwhelming demand, the margins for launching companies are breathtaking. I mean, guess there's a reason why SpaceX is the highest value private venture funded company in the world. There's a reason. And there is space for 10 more SpaceX. I mean, how can a venture cap not be excited seeing that opportunity? And on the same time, it is difficult, but at the same time, the technology is proven. If you look at the rocket engine of SpaceX and all other rocket engines, this is 80-year-old technology. There's nothing changed in principle. If you go back to actually late 30s, early 40s, this technology has been initially developed in Munich. Yeah, in the context of weapons, very bad in World War II. But the technology of the V2 is basically the same thing. What we're currently doing is nothing. So there is zero physical risk. It's only engineering risk. And obviously we do 3 painted chambers and engines. So we're on a different level now, and performance and what have you. But the basic physics is proven. There is, and it is. If you find smart enough engineers, you can buy a rocket. You need obviously pre-fund it. It's the opposite of asset light. So most of venture caps are going to run away, but the return, the point is fantastic. It is breathtaking. This is only launchers.
And on the launches, like, do you think we'll be able someday to make it almost like a net zero impact? Because for now, obviously, I think the launch requires a lot of energy. I don't know where it comes from actually. If it's oil, I would
No,
believe.
it's not oil. They're different. They're different fuels you use. You have combination. You can use propane together with oxygen, or kerosene together with oxygen. But without doubt, the rockets emitting a huge amount of CO2. Full stop. Do I see anytime soon a net zero launcher? No, I don't. Actually, I don't. Uh, in order to make it a sensible CO2 investment from a sustainability point of view, you have to zoom out a little bit and say, if we use that CO2 emission to install a lower orbit satellite constellation, observation constellation, which allows us to detect forest fires um, um, just, I don't know, 24 hours, 12 hours earlier. And the reduction we create, we induce through this by a much faster distinguishing of the fire and limiting the size of the forest fire is way outpacing what we invest into the launching. At the same time, that constellation may be able to police deforestations. Yeah, in Brazil and where have you, in the jungle where you cannot, observe people doing bad things to trees from space, you obviously do see it, and the earlier you see it, you can police it better. As if you couldn't. I'm saying if you zoom out, the balance of CO2 is absolutely positive. If you zoom in and say you look only at the launch, it is a disaster.
So, what are the other technologies that you're excited about apart from the launch part? Then, as an investment perspective, from an investment perspective.
I mean, you should rather ask me what part I'm not excited about. So it's, it's dangerous. No, I mean, just think about satellites. We were talking about the number of satellites being launched today. Each and every satellite is a one-off, handmade, assembled, very deep value creation, inefficient, expensive. If we changing and if we developing into an industry where we will be seeing 10,000s of satellites being produced every year, we will be having industrialized production chains to create satellites. There will be a tiered production industry. You will be having system providers. You will have first tier vendors providing propulsion systems, solar cells, what have you, standardized, and you can say how much watts you like to get for your satellite. Much more efficient, and everybody and every satellite will use the same components. Yeah, bringing down cost per satellite enormously. Huge opportunities. You can choose to become a system integrator. You can choose to become a certain component manufacturing, whatever. Yeah, super interesting. Not talking about the individual technologies we're going to use. More efficient propulsion systems, and avionics navigation systems. Then you have all sorts of services and systems you're going to use for deorbiting, yeah, cleaning up, the orbit from pollution. And then you will be having new regulation. I was talking to a startup today, who they're going to create very interesting, basically parachutes for satellites, because in the lower orbit you have a very thin though, but a remaining atmosphere, and you have if you have large sails like parachutes you can use, they can deorbit the satellite once it is beyond its lifetime. I can foresee that there will be a global regulation requiring deorbiting systems for each and every piece you send to orbit. Huge opportunity. And it's enormous. And you wouldn't believe how big that opportunity is just for these passive parachutes for satellites. Um, and then it comes to services, yeah, and say, operating satellites and providing services. I mean, think about what Starlink does, yeah, internet services through space. Think about navigation services. So if we think about autonomous driving, no autonomous driving system will ever be able to function without a lower orbit navigation or navigation system, yeah, GPS system, because the current GPS system for the satellites flying on 20,000 kilometers in height, and they're getting up to a precision of maximum plus minus 10 meters if you have the military version. This is, I mean, if you think about traffic in the city, 10 meters is a number, yeah? If you go to a lower orbit, you can go up to 1 plus minus 1 centimeters. That is not a problem. Everybody, every automotive company providing autonomous will be needing that service, lower orbit GPS services. We were talking about observatory and high resolution systems and the benefits you can uh, fire detection, uh, endless opportunities. We have not even started to talk about in-orbit manufacturing. Um, Enormous, yeah, because in low or zero gravitation environments, you can create materials and products you will never ever be able to create on Earth. High value products, from semiconductors to even think about a simple thing like alloy. Yeah, because of the gravitation, it is extremely difficult to create high homogeneous alloys on Earth because they're fluid at the beginning, and the more heavy parts are sinking down, and the other. So it's never 100% homogeneous. If you do the same thing in space, it is, and the impact on strength is enormous. Yeah, you have way less defects. You have much higher quality of materials. So I can go on and go on. The opportunities are breathtaking.
No, that makes a lot of sense. It feels like there is an entire almost economy that's going to be created by this sector. Going back to your approach at Earlybird Venture Capital, I think what I find interesting there is like these technologies are all very much deep scientific discovery projects, right? Like they are not your B2B SaaS company that we all know how to do. Does that affect your approach from an investment perspective? Does that affect how you build your team around you, for example? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, it does. First of all, I don't want to judge. Um, the different strategies of venture capital. They're very valid investment strategies, funding business model innovations. It's just not our approach. We are passionate about technology or the technologically differentiated opportunities. But it does affect how you do it, and because the risk profile is different. Um, in business model innovation, the main risk is the risk of product market fit. There is little what I call realization risk. So the concept, once you have created it, you can create it. You can build the business system. Not much risk involved. The risk is does it meet market needs, and this is actually a very challenging thing to judge even if you have early market validation. I mean, think about, quick commerce. These companies had been hyped enormously at the beginning because they had so much traction. Um, but they ended up in a situation where we had to learn that unit economics were not satisfying. People will not be willing to pay what it actually costs to provide the fast delivery. So basically, these concepts failed. It is difficult to judge it, and there is always, even in later stages, a significant remaining risk. If I now look at technology differentiated deals, the risk profile is very different. Typically, the product market fit risk of business model innovation does not exist. I mean, if I invest in Marvel Fusion as a nuclear fusion concept, um, I think we're in agreement that the electricity will be sellable at a single amount of cent per kilowatt hour. Yeah, CO2 free and risk free, and not the market is there. Yeah, no reason to talk. The risk is, can we realize it? And the realization risk actually has two constituents, two elements which needs to be considered. One is the technology working at all? Especially if we talk about nuclear fusion, this is an enormous part of the risk. And the second thing is, since these deep tech innovations tend to need significant upfront funding before you get a proof of concept, are we able to find that funding in the market? Because we as Earlybird are typically not able to provide the full funding until proof of concept. So we have these two risk elements as primary risk to be assessed. Yeah, technological validity and access to capital, sufficient access to capital. While in the business model innovation, we're talking about product market fit. It's not better or worse, it's just different. But if you do a venture strategy as we do it, where you look predominantly at technology differentiated deals, you have to hone and develop your capabilities to actually assess these two constituents: the technological validity and the access to capital, combined, representing the realization risk. And this is what we're trying to make ourselves competent in, to become experts in. We're trying to have technology-minded staff, people who have access to the right communities in order to assess technological risk, to make ourselves comfortable in certain situations, and also to develop our own procedures and assessments. What is going to be the likelihood that we can actually assemble a next round, which can carry then our company forward beyond the capital what we can provide?
Yeah, and I think that same framework applies also to any other type of deep tech. Because like we're talking about space tech now, but
Absolutely, 100%. This is a framework. It applies to all sorts of deep tech.
well, I guess moving on to the next section, one topic that I find interesting, and we already touched a little bit on it, but I wonder how space tech can complement climate tech on the ground. What are the synergies we'll see there? You already mentioned a little bit with satellite imagery, for example, for forest management. But how do you see that collaboration happening between what we can do on Earth and what we can do in space?
I think space tech will always be an extension what we do on Earth. Space tech, isolated space tech, I don't see. I mean, if people dreaming from artificial planets creating in space with new, I don't know, societies on it, I do not believe that this is anything, well, I think it's tangible and close. But what I do see is through the very special circumstances we have in space, yeah, no gravitation in the first place, homogeneous situation, temperature, what have you, allows us to achieve very special products, opportunities, We have, the distance perspective on the Earth with respect to observation. We have the opportunity to collect sun energy in a much more efficient way. But it all only makes sense if you have a correspondent on Earth. We are receiving the energy, we're using something, the data we receive from space, and we potentially need to complement that data with data collected on Earth to refine and calibrate it, and only collectively and together all the data sources can actually lead us and to the seek insights. I think it is always a give and take, and I really like to see space as an extension of the opportunities we on work to serve us on Earth.
Yeah, I love that perspective. But look, we're getting toward the end of this episode, but we have one last section, which is a rapid fire questions. So I have about 10 questions for you now. You will need to answer within one sentence, maybe two maximum. Are you ready for that?
Yeah, let me say the way, and I'm trying my very best. And please excuse me if I'm missing out on one.
What's the most exciting space tech innovation you've seen recently?
I think the collection of the first stage of Starship, I think that I really found stunning.
Very interesting, for sure. What's a common misconception about space tech as it relates to climate change?
I think we discussed that beforehand. It's seen too narrow. It's seen as a CO2 emitter. And people need to zoom out and see the way higher benefits space tech is enabling us to achieve by positioning satellites or what have you in space.
Yeah, and that's in the context of using it for good, right? Because you could also do very bad thing with it. What's one piece of advice for someone that wants to start a climate tech or space tech company?
Reaching out to the stars is always good. Follow your passion. The biggest reason for failure is not having tried it.
That's for sure. What's one advice that you would give to someone that's looking to invest in space tech?
It's a high-tech arena, and you have to find ways to make your mind up with the two dimensions of realization risk. Is it technologically feasible? And is it likely that you're going to find the funding which is needed to reach proof of concept?
Yeah, that's almost like the timeline. Like, is it technologically feasible within a reasonable timeline and not like 30 years of research? If you were not a VC, what role would you play in fighting climate change?
I would become a politician.
I could see that. What's one thing traditional VCs misunderstand about investing in climate tech?
I think it's been seen too much as a philanthropic mission, and that one needs to do concessions in the economical return in order to do viable climatic investments. I think this is absolutely stupid and wrong. I think the more economical return we can create in a climate investment, the more impact it's going to produce.
What's the biggest barrier to accelerating climate technologies in general?
I think it's economical return. We have to find economically viable solutions which synchronously have a positive environmental impact. And these opportunities do exist.
Makes a lot of sense. What's a green flag when investing in a startup?
A passionate CEO who's leading and convincing.
And what's a red flag?
Missing that person. No, there's a couple of red flags as well. Yeah. Too niche application. We only can invest in opportunities with uncapped upside. That means it needs to be a huge underlying market. And there need to be a certain defensibility because young startups tend to be volatile. They need to protect themselves until they get big and strong themselves. So there are a couple of elements which are important, which we need to look at. But I think I'd like to get across that the people do make the difference, and this is where everything starts and ends.
Yeah, and I think it's true at every stage of obviously like at earlier stages, that's all we have basically is a team and maybe some sort of a proof of concept. But even at later stages, I feel like the team is just like super important. What are the three most important things to be a successful impact VC?
The three most important things, I think, uh, access to opportunities. The problem is that the universe of deals with positive impact is much smaller than those with pure economical feedback, if or return. If you want to do an impact fund, it is of utmost importance to really capture what is in the market, and that is difficult. Since the startups tend to be first in stealth, and then they do not have, the reach, and even might not even be interested to talk to each and every VC, and they may even don't know you. So, how do you make sure that you really get access at the right point of time to the universe of opportunities? I think this is extremely important. And then, I mean, as a second dimension, and that is not very much different than of being a normal VC, you have to have a best-in-class filter to boil down the number of opportunities presented to you to the few ones you can fund and you do want to fund. And that election process is the core value creation of each venture cap. I mean, people, if you talk to venture capitalists, they talk a lot about their value add once they're invested in order to sell themselves, which is okay. But if you zoom out and take the perspective of the LP, the investor behind the VC, then the by far the most significant value creation stems from the filter a certain VC team applies by deciding which team they back and which not.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, we are at the end of this podcast. Where can we find you online if people want to reach out to you because they have a great project, for example?
Yes, and send me an email. I would be delighted to see it. Hendrik at earlybird.com.
And one last question for you today. Who's the next person that should be in your seat to talk about climate and venture capital? Usually I aim for general partners, but
You aim for a general partner. I would recommend, I mean, obviously I have limited knowledge about the community, people who I know and who I think highly of. I would recommend to talk to Fabian Heilemann, former partner of mine, who separated because he was so passionate about early on about climate change and impact, that he found that what Earlybird is doing was too commercial. Um, great person, very knowledgeable investor, and definitely somebody who's changing the world to the better.
I love that. I will definitely reach out. Well, listeners, if you like this episode and if you like the show, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're on YouTube, or give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast and Spotify. Thank you so much, Hendrik.
Thank you, Hugo, for inviting me.